Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Eric, and today we're going to be talking about food intolerances versus food allergies. There's a bit of a difference. Actually, there's quite a bit of a difference. I would say that there's a spectrum for both of them, but today we're just going to cover the basics. I'm not going to really cover too many of the more advanced or complex situations when it comes to, let's say allergies, for example. I'll just cover the basics because I'm not a specialist, but it is good to understand that there is a spectrum for both. I have food intolerances, I'll basically be covering lactose intolerance because I have that. I've had it my whole life, and I only really figured it out when I was in my teens. I just kind of dealt with the pain when I was younger, and I wouldn't recommend because the symptoms can obviously get worse. It can actually really take a beating on your body, and well, that's what we're going to talk about. So I'll get right into it. So reading from my document here, I'll also be posting this in the description so that you have a visual if you want it. Food intolerance is the inability to properly digest specific foods. So usually these specific foods are unique to the individual's genetic makeup. So based on you and let's say your parents and what they are capable of digesting, or even their grandparents, this is actually something that can skip a generation or multiple generations. It can come out of the blue, out of nowhere. You will have the inability to properly digest these foods, hence causing problems like stomach problems. You might be gassy, you might have issues in the washroom, or it might cause constipation, all sorts of issues. Or it can even really take a toll on your body, it'll actually tear the lining of the insides of your organs because of the process that it's not able to complete properly. So essentially these foods go through your body not fully processed, and or it can actually really hurt you. So it could actually have the opposing effect. So that is more like an allergy, but I would actually also argue to say that the spectrum that the intolerance can have, it can either be just very minor, where it just causes a little bit of discomfort. So that'd be the very easy or not so bad end of the spectrum. But the bad end of the spectrum would be that, well, it makes you really have to go to the washroom, gives you really bad stomach aches, makes you feel unwell, maybe even puts you out for a day or so. These are the things that can happen, and it's really just dependent on you, the person who has the intolerance. Now, when we're talking about intolerance, it means that you can still do things, and basically you're not going to need to go to the hospital. With an allergy, on the other hand, that's a completely different story. We'll get to that in a minute, but I'm just going to finish here. So lactose intolerance, as stated in the Harvard Health reference, so I used Harvard as a reference because, like I said, I'm not a professional when it comes to this. I just have personal experiences. So it's best that I actually go off of a different reference, which this one is pretty good. Is the most common food intolerance. So lactose intolerance is what we would call the most common, because technically speaking, you're not supposed to digest milk after a certain period of time. It's something that you should only be able to process as an infant, which is an intolerance to milk products. As we get older, our ability to digest dairy decreases. So this is a direct quote from Harvard. That's because with age, our intestines make less of the enzyme, which is lactase. So you can actually buy Lactase Pills. They're just really expensive. I have a few personal opinions on that one. That processes lactose, so it actually allows you to digest the lactose properly. While these conditions are not life-threatening, so like I said, you can still do things throughout your day, usually, unless it actually puts you out and makes you feel unwell, but usually you don't need to be hospitalized for it. It can make those with it very uncomfortable. So speaking from experience, yeah, it really can. Usually when you go through one of these reactions, you sometimes feel better afterwards, but also, like I said, it can take a toll on you. So it could actually, you can go through the issues. So like severe diarrhea, for example, or severe constipation. For some reason, it's one or the other. I've had both, and it might also be because I have something called celiac, which is technically, I think it's an intolerance, but I also think it can also be a bit of an allergy. It's not the worst allergy out there. Obviously, nuts is worse. We'll get to that in a second, but celiac is complicated because it actually does really affect your insides in a different way. I know that it did for me. Avoidance of these causes would be one solution. The lactose pills exist. So like I said, they're just really expensive. What kind of boggles my mind though is that the pharmaceutical company, they really make money off of this type of idea. I don't understand why we don't just make milk lactose free altogether. But then again, I feel like some people like the idea of just having pure natural milk if they're able to digest it. The only thing is, what is the number that I say here? I think I said about 65 to 70% of the population cannot process lactose. So, but then again, here in the Western world, I don't know what that number is, but I do know that's more like a worldwide statistics. So yeah, it's quite interesting if you ask me. So going to the food allergy, food allergies also have a spectrum. So it's either, it can affect you slightly, so it gives you rashes, gives you discomfort and issues that aren't so life-threatening. But then the opposite spectrum of that is death. It can actually kill you. So like a peanut allergy, for example. I've been in school with people with peanut allergies, and I've never seen the reaction. I've seen videos, but really it's just the swelling, the puffiness. It actually makes your face, your whole body can have a whole body reaction. It can make it harder to breathe, harder to move or do anything. It could probably do other things. I'll try to find some other videos so that I can put it in my food and nutrition playlist along with this one. But yeah, it's not a good thing to have a food allergy, but when you do have one, you could either find out through an allergy test. So you can go to an allergy specialist and get tested. They usually do like a prick test on I think it's your back, but then they figure it out that way. But then the other way is, finding out the hard way. When I was younger, I used to be allergic to citrus. I learned that the hard way, but then something happened in my earlier years where I became able to drink and eat citrus-based products. So when you're developing, you may have an intolerance or an allergy, but you can also grow out of it. But then again, you can also grow into an allergy or an intolerance. So that's why these are things that sometimes change throughout life. That's why it's good to know you as best as possible and act accordingly. So a food allergy is our body's inability of properly digesting certain foods, kind of like lactose intolerance and an intolerance in itself. But like I said, it's a spectrum, and an allergy is usually worse. And in the case of ingesting something that we are allergic to, such as peanuts or seafood, it would cause our body's immune system response to activate. And depending on the type of allergic reaction, we would develop either rashes, swelling, lightheadedness, problems breathing, and without the use of epinephrine in a short amount of time could be fatal. So that's coming from Harvard. You would need to have an Epi-Pen, which usually you would jab into your thigh, and that would usually immediately relieve the symptoms. But what if you do not have epinephrine? It could be fatal. So that's why it's best to know your allergies, to know what you're allergic to be careful, to be mindful. When I was in college, we actually had dorm rooms that were nut-free, and there's a reason why we did that. Someone died on campus because of a nut allergy, and it's not an uncommon occurrence, but we try our best to avoid that by knowing what we're allergic to. So for example, for me anyways, it's not really an allergy because I don't have that kind of reaction, but celiac disease is a disease that only affects about 1% of the Western population. Gluten is the initiating factor for celiac, so that just means that bread is not what we would eat, except there are different kinds of breads, thankfully. So if you eat regular bread, I envy you greatly. I wish I could. I miss the soft texture. I miss oh man, I miss that stuff. But anyways, can't eat it. I can't eat it at all. Because the first time I will eat it, I can usually feel it. I actually have a better mind-body connection with that now because it took me time to develop that. It kind of feels like sandpaper going through my body, and it is not a nice feeling. It doesn't hurt usually badly the first time around. It does kind of, but the more often I eat it, or if it's constantly, then it will get worse, and usually it results in bloody stools. Not a fun thing, and so that's why I avoid bread completely. Or, well, I avoid gluten-containing bread. I still like to eat bread, don't get me wrong. It's just really expensive. Really, really expensive. Okay, so yeah, and while eating gluten every so often does not trigger major responses, eating it in prolonged periods can cause malnutrition, diarrhea, and weight loss. So I actually had a really hard time gaining weight when I was younger. I never really understood why, and well, this is something that we were learning at the time. We're still, well, I wouldn't say we're still learning it. I would actually say that we failed to teach it in school, like everything else I'm talking about. So yeah, we should really take more steps to teaching this to kids at school. That's what I believe, because who knows? We could be avoiding a lot of these things, teaching people better. I knew people with stuff such as Crohn's disease. Crohn's is something where you're in and out of the hospital constantly. You have a hard time digesting so many things, and you're on a very, very, very particular diet. I worked with someone with Crohn's, and one of the nicest people I knew, but yeah, she had to be in and out of the hospital, and she had a hard time gaining weight. Very, very, very poor situation. I do not envy her, but yeah, I feel bad for her, if anything. Sometimes, however, some people might not have a horribly bad reaction to gluten, but instead it causes stomach pain, joint pain, fatigue, rashes, and brain fog. That's usually when I first eat it. It's not bad, but it gets worse usually. So, there is no defined terminology to describe being able to digest everything. I envy you greatly. Or to not be allergic or intolerable to anything digestible by humans. So you would then be considered immune, or basically having all of the correct genetic markers to all potential genetic and developmental allergens. So for example, we should not be able to digest lactose after the age of 5. So that's just the example. So yeah, we really shouldn't be able to, but some people may be allergic to peanuts and seafood throughout the entirety of their life due to genetic variability. Sometimes we can also gain these allergies later in life. So that's what I said earlier. So why does this happen, and how do we work with this concept? Well, I mean, when we do have it, the best choice is usually avoidance. If it's lactose intolerance, like I said, we can have the pills, but they're expensive, and if you can't afford it, then the best case scenario is usually just avoidance. You could drink soy milk or lactose-free milk. It's a little bit more expensive, but I mean, you do what you gotta, right? Okay, I do talk a little bit about how stress can affect the way that you digest foods. I have some skepticism to that though, because of the fact that yes, when we are stressed out, our body is a little bit more intolerable to certain scenarios. But I have a little bit of skepticism to that, just because I've seen some pretty stressed out people eat and not have any food issues. Well, I mean, there's No, I can't come up with anything. Yeah, I have some skepticism to that idea. So you can read my document if you like. You can even do your own research, but I really don't think stress causes too much food issues. I think it's more to do with the intolerance and the allergy concept. When does this usually happen? So the cause and effect will be different per individual based on genetics. Yeah, it really is dependent on you. And the amount of exposure to the thing that you're intolerable to or allergic to will dictate the outcome and the amount of issues that you might have. So if you have a nut allergy and you eat a little tiny bit, you might not have that bad of a allergy, but then again, if you're like super allergic, that little tiny amount could be the thing that kills you. So that's why we have to consider the fact that everyone is unique. Who does this affect? So, like I said, about 65 to 70% of the population is lactose intolerant. I say around 35% of people worldwide can digest lactose, while celiac disease only affects around 1% of the population. So I am a rarity. Food issues occur in a good majority of the population, and very rarely is a person ever able to eat everything without any issues. If you are this person, consider yourself lucky. So, who is the best person to consider asking for advice if I believe I have an issue with digesting foods? Usually I would recommend a dietitian, but I've worked with a dietitian before, and wow, it's really hard to find someone who is good. I went with someone who had a PhD. I went with someone who worked with people, and yeah, they gave me one of those swab tests, and my thing came back negative for celiac. But then I met with someone else. I had the test again, but they told me, and a doctor, and they said I had to eat gluten. So I ate gluten, and then it came up positive. So the dietitian that I worked with the fancy PhD, did not tell me that I needed to eat gluten, and I paid a lot of money for that one. And yeah, like I would recommend the doctor among all others. An allergy specialist might actually be the one that you'd want to go to. But yeah, a dietitian is usually good for, I'm having a hard time with that one. Usually they're supposed to be good with recommending you foods based on you, and your goal. But then again, we have something called nutritionists as well. Yeah, it's kind of hard to recommend these specialists when, they're all up in the air. Kind of like personal trainers and physiotherapists and... when you know what you're allergic to, just avoid. Same with lactose intolerance, any intolerance, just avoid it. Okay, so that's the end of this video. That is the last of the nutrition videos, and I'm thankful because nutrition is not my favorite topic to cover. I'm more of the exercise person. I like to talk about exercise, movement, injury prevention, and how to make a program, so that's what I'm going to be going into next. The next video will be the movement analysis video. I'm going to be talking about the importance of exercising light in certain weeks. So once every 2 to 4 months to see what you're capable of, to see how you feel, to see what you shouldn't do. So I'm going to be talking about that in the next video. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, or anything you want to say, go ahead and say it in the comments and we can have a discussion. This is not really my specialty in this video, but you can bring anything up. If you have anything like, let's say, Crohn's or irritable bowel syndrome, or you're allergic to nuts, fish, or anything like that, or shellfish, go ahead and bring it up. Let's start a discussion. But anyways, have a good one. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.